Welcome to the Forecast with Gary Lezak podcast. It's great to be here. My life partner, Andy Caraway, 25 years together. Well, our 25th anniversary is coming up. So we got a lot to talk about. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. But first of all, hey, listen, this is the Forecast with Gary Lezak, and I'm going to take you through this third episode. We're going to talk about addiction, alcoholism, and the Chiefs, a little bit of weather 2020. But right now, I want you to like this podcast, and on YouTube, please subscribe. So push that subscribe button. And if you want to be a sponsor, go to Sandy at 810WHB.com. Sandy at 810WHB.com. And please let us know. We do have a great sponsor, Results Personal Fitness. You want to get your results? That's right. David Schlossman at Results. It's 135th and Metcalf. And they have a great system there. Personal trainers. I've been working there for how long? Working out there? 20
years.
20 years. So David keeps me in shape. And so thank you very much. Once again, Results Personal Fitness. And if you want to be a sponsor, once again, contact Sandy at 810WHB.com. We're going to get to the topic of the day in just a minute. We're going to finish with the Denver Broncos versus Chiefs game at Arrowhead on January 1st, New Year's Day. We also are going to talk about Cincinnati Buffalo at the very end. Oh boy, that could be an epic game on Monday Night Football. But first, I want to talk to you today about Weather 2020. The LRC, Buffalo, New York, just had over 100 inches of snow. Over 30 people were killed. 40 people were killed there. In Buffalo, what happened? Well, the LRC set up this season in November. It started snowing there. Now they're up to over 100 inches of snow. And Buffalo is the center of the storm systems for going into 2023. And if you want to know what's going to happen in 2023 for the next few months, Weather 2020 has a solution. Go to weather2020.substack.com and you can be a customer there. But this pattern is absolutely fascinating. But let's get to the topic of the day. While Andy sits here, we've been together a long time, and we went through a life experience. And, addiction, I didn't know a lot about. I've learned a lot. You've learned a lot. Mm-hmm. And alcoholism. And let's go back to 5 years ago, five or so years ago. And tell us a little bit of your life story, and because it's something to celebrate. Before you go even further, one more thing before you say anything. Congratulations.
Thank you.
On January 5th, 54 months.
Wow.
How does that feel? 54 months without one drink.
It's an accomplishment, but it's also something you don't take for granted. And one of the sayings we have in the community of addiction and alcoholism is one day at a time. So, I try not to get too caught up on the number of months or years.
Is it truly one day at a time for you?
It can be. In the community, and when I say the word community, I'm referring to the recovery community, typically people that attend 12-step meetings. You'll talk to people who have been sober for like 30 years and you'll ask them, well, how do you do it? And they'll say, one day at a time. So it can be. I think the further you get into your sobriety, your clean time, the more you feel like, okay, well, it's not one day at a time. In early sobriety, some people will say, yeah, it's definitely one day at a time. I mean, like, let me get through this 24-hour period without using. And for some people, it's like 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time, because early sobriety can be really challenging for a lot of folks.
So go back to, again, 2017. I know what happened Halloween night and what happened the next day on November 1st. But leading up to that, the years leading up to that, do you remember that time? Because it's probably a little fuzzy for you. Tell us your experience with leading up to that moment where I ended up taking you to the hospital.
Well, one of the things that we say is that the disease, and we do refer to it as a disease, not everybody's comfortable with that terminology, But in the addiction science field, it's very much considered a disease nowadays. In fact, it's called a brain disease because the disease obviously centers in the mind. So in the disease or in the recovery community, we talk about it being progressive, and that was very much the case for me. I in my 30s, a couple of different life things happened where I was kind of in between careers, and I had some downtime, and I've always been an alcoholic. I just haven't practiced my alcoholism as much as I started to in my 30s. I mean, after looking back at my life trajectory, I realized I've never had a healthy relationship with alcohol. But anyway, in my 30s, it just kind of started where it was like 2 or 3 nights, and 3 or 4, then 4, 5, 5, 6, and then at some point, I crossed this threshold where it was like I'm drinking every night, and then the amount of time in a given 24-hour period that I was drinking increased, and it was that way for years, 5+ years, I think. We figured at least that I never took one evening off without drinking, hard liquor, which in my case is what really got me. And so, leading up until October 31st, 2017, especially that last year, my body started to really shut down because of what I was doing to it, specifically my liver. And like you said, on October 31st, you all came down and had an intervention of sorts and convinced me, begrudgingly, unfortunately, to go to the hospital the next day. So I did. And, that's the next part of the story.
Yeah. So leading up to that, those 2 years leading up to that, did you notice you were getting sick? Were you in denial? You didn't acknowledge that you might be an alcoholic? I remember asking you, I said, Andy, the doctor says that if you drink tomorrow, you might be in a coma. So, and then you still ended up drinking, and fortunately you didn't go into a coma, but it was awfully close. You were literally that close to death. Your near-death experience was different than others. Tell us about that.
Well, I want to say this. I work in the field of recovery now. I'm lucky enough to get that opportunity. So I spend quite a bit of time of studying the field of addiction. And this is something that I think people don't realize, is that when a person's in their active addiction, they are part of the diseases they're unable to see. So how far gone they are, their ability to recognize the signs and symptoms that somebody who's with fresh eyes can say, hey, listen, you're not eating anymore. You can't hold down food, which was definitely part of my story. You would think that I, being relatively intelligent, would be like, wait a second, this is really wrong. But I was so much in my disease, I wasn't able to make that connection. Like, hey, you're not able to hold down food because you can't stop drinking, and maybe you should take a night off. But, at that point, for me personally, it was unfathomable. I could not imagine going to sleep sober or not, having a drink, at some point the next day.
Right. So do you think this stems back from when you were a child? You go back to your childhood years and your teens and 20s. Were there signs of this at the beginning? How does this work? You're now an expert at alcoholism, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't know about expert, but like I said, I spend a lot of time thinking and working with people who are also in recovery. Like I said, I don't think I ever had a healthy relationship with alcohol. I remember pretty well the first time I got relatively buzzed/drunk. And I remember lighting up on the inside and feeling warm. And you'll hear this experience with a lot of alcoholics who will say, when they had that first intoxicated experience, it was like, this is what I'm supposed to be feeling like. And that does really, for a lot of us, that is an experience that we share, is that when we first engage with alcohol, that it hit our brain and our system in a way that's different than non-alcoholics. So yeah, I drank throughout in my entire life, obviously until the last 5 years. And whenever I've drank alcohol, I've never drank to like have one or two and then be done. That's, in alcoholic circles, in meetings, you'll hear people say, no, once it's on, it's on. And I'm going until I either pass out or whatever. But I don't, one is too much and 1,000's never enough. That's one of our sayings.
Wow. So let's compare someone like you that has that situation and someone like me. You've seen me when I do occasionally have a drink once in a while. What is the difference? Because I'm not an alcoholic. So is there a big difference there?
Yeah, I mean, brain chemistry. And some people even think it's not just even in the brain, it's in the body. Something about how our bodies, that is alcoholics, bodies and brains respond to the chemical alcohol. And so when you or the average person, what we call the normal drinker, has alcohol in their system, they'll have one, maybe two, and alcohol is, it's toxic, in large amounts, and sort of kind of even a poison. And so at some point, the non-alcoholic drinker, some are like, okay, I've had enough. I don't want to get too drunk, or, I don't want to feel bad tomorrow. Where, the alcoholic drinker is like, no, I want more. I like this, and I want to keep feeling that way. So that's the difference. Now, there's variations. There's people that can drink kind of hard who will drink maybe sometimes in a way that looks alcoholic, but those are the people sometimes who could say, all right, this is getting out of control. I got to stop. I need to take a month off. It's dry January. Where the alcoholics like, yeah, no.
So you just said dry January. A lot of people right now, here it is. Happy New Year, everybody. It's 2023 coming up. And your 54-month time is January 5th. And a lot of people do dry January. What do you say to those people? They're not all alcoholics, are they? Or no. Could they be?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we try to emphasize is that no one is trying to, say that someone else is an alcoholic. That's not ever a healthy thing for us to go around and say, you're an alcoholic. I mean, every person who, whether it be alcoholism or addiction, has to make that decision and determine that for themselves. So, but yeah, there's definitely people who maybe drink hard, and the holidays were especially, heavy with alcohol consumption, as that happens around that time of year. And they're like, okay, it's January, I'm going to cut it out. And, they might be a little uncomfortable, going to dinner or not being able to have a drink when they get home from work, or a glass of wine. But, given enough motivation, the non-alcoholic drinker is usually successful.
Wow. that is incredible. So what is the solution? You have worked with people, you have, what they call a sponsor and sponsees. I mean, you can talk to that. You are impacting people's lives in a really positive way now. How does that feel? And what is a way to help the alcoholic out there? What are the best ways?
Well, first of all, the alcoholic or addict, we talk a lot about alcoholism because that's a lot of my story, but, I have some drug history. But so the alcoholic addict, first of all, they have to decide they want the help. And until they have that frame of mind that for whatever reason their life has become what we call powerless and unmanageable, until they have that moment of surrender, which is a word we use, which like lots of people don't like that word, but it's super important in recovery that we say, okay, this has gotten out of control and I need help. So that's the first.
And that's what surrender means?
Yes. And that, we sometimes say we surrender to win, because we're not going to get the help until we admit admit that we're beaten. Sometimes you'll hear people say, "I'm fighting alcoholism." No, if you're in full blown alcoholism, alcohol's won. So we don't kind of give up the fight in that sense, which I know sometimes sounds weird to people. But then you start reaching out, and obviously one of the places that people go most often is 12-step programs, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, depending on if they're primarily a drug user, not necessarily an alcoholic. They'll go to Narcotics Anonymous. And then people who primarily identify as alcoholics, they may have some drug story. And then there's people that kind of just feel more comfortable in one of the other programs. But that's where a lot of us go to get successful, because there's a lot of reasons that those programs work. But probably one of the most important ones is that there's camaraderie. That you're sitting around with people who get it, who are in the same shoes you're in or have been there. And so you identify with one another, and that's incredibly powerful when somebody's in early recovery or in recovery in general, because it's harder to go out and drink when you have a lot of support on a regular basis. If you're isolated, you don't have a lot of support, drinking becomes a more viable option.
So go through your 54 months here. Now, the first few weeks, I remember you saying, "I'm anti-alcoholic." Now you say, "I am an alcoholic." There was a transition where you finally admitted that you were. Was that difficult for you?
Yeah, I mean, and this is not true of everybody, but even before I got so sick and died,
Almost died.
Well, almost died. Well, at some point it kind of felt. I feel like that I was in a state of the alcohol had taken over to the point where I wasn't able to have any realization. And so if you would have asked me if I was an alcoholic at that moment in time, I would have had no ability to recognize my problem and was in complete denial. And, I had some medical professionals trying to tell me, including a doctor who felt my liver distended and told me I was an alcoholic. And I promptly told him he didn't understand me.
You kept that from me, by the way.
Yeah. Well, that's something we do as alcoholics, is we hide our disease, and some of us get really crafty and manipulative at deceiving others, because, again, the last thing most of us want to do is be called out on our drinking.
I know. I would say, "Hey, how did you get your physical and you get your blood test?" And I'd say, "Well, how were your liver enzymes? How did the blood test come out?" And you'd say,
"Oh, they're fine." We call that minimization. Asking an alcoholic,
and they were not fine.
No, you're like, "Oh, they're fine. Yeah, doctor says
just
I should
double
be okay."
normal.
Yeah, or more, quite honestly. But yeah, so when you first, and this is not the same for everybody, but I'm just speaking generally. A lot of us, when we first are coming to confront the diagnosis alcoholism, we're not a big fan of saying, "I'm an alcoholic," and proclaiming it. So part of my story is I was stubborn earlier, and I kind of fought a lot of this stuff. And so, yeah, at first I was like, anti-alcoholic, like sort of begrudgingly. And then as time goes on and I really realized the what I was going through and what it's really had happened to me, I'm like, okay, obviously I'm an alcoholic. So, but that's, for some people, that's a hard pill to swallow and hard words to utter. And
you've been around people that are in your groups and in your support groups through AA, you've talked about, and you've been a sponsor. You've worked with a lot of people now, and it comes down to, like you said earlier, you have to want to stop drinking, first of all, right? Then it's challenging because it's day by day, because life is hard, right? So tell us about that difficulty for most people, and how this is a mental disease. It's not, I know it can be embarrassing, right? But it really is a mental disease. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, you asked a couple of questions there. Yeah. As far as the disease is concerned, again, like I said, nowadays people refer to it kind of as a brain disease. It's referred to as like substance use disorders, and there's some criteria that one has to meet to be diagnosed with that medically. Alcoholic in itself is not a medical term, but it's generally, widely accepted and understood what alcoholism looks like. As far as getting the support that you need to be successful in maintaining sobriety, it comes in a variety of forms. Again, I'm going to tout the importance of camaraderie, having people that you're in constant, well, not constant, but consistent communication with about your situation, because it's important to feel like we're being heard and understood. There's a lot of stigma still related to the condition, disease of alcoholism, and so some people, we have to battle that. I found that there's a lot of misunderstanding about alcoholism and addiction. People still see it as some sort of a moral failing or some sort of misbehavior on the part of the alcoholic addict, and I'm definitely advocate of people understanding that it's not a moral failing or misbehavior. It's somebody that's in their disease. And so when they decide to get sober, they go to meetings or they find other addict alcoholics to work with. Sometimes that means meeting for coffee, or actually there's things called sponsors and sponsees, and that's when two alcoholics or addicts work together to do what we call step work and just, to be an additional support, possibly just that. So, and then, if you are in the 12-step programs, there's a spiritual component to it all. And that's one of the big deals in that recovery community, is figuring out what your spiritual connection is and how that might assist you in getting and staying sober. Not religious. We always make that distinction. The 12-step communities are not religious programs or organizations. They are spiritual in nature, which leaves a lot more room for people to be included.
Right. So talk to the family that might have their son or daughter that they're dealing with potential of them being an alcoholic, and what kind of support does the family have for this family member?
Well, I mean, and again, so that's one of the most challenging parts of this situation, is that there's misunderstanding on the family's part. There's misunderstanding on the addict alcoholic's part. I mean, there's a stigma obviously attached to it, and that's one of the reasons that we don't want to, in early stages, even consider ourselves alcoholics. And then a lot of us don't understand what's been going on, what has happened to our brains and bodies. So it's hard for us to even begin to know where to go to help our family members and or loved ones or close friends. But if somebody's in the program or in 12-step programs, they can point them to, there's adjoining programs that are just for family members of the alcoholic addict or loved ones.
Al-Anon
is one of the programs that's out there specifically for people who are family members of alcoholics. So there's that. But I'm really, really encourage people who are confronting, that realization that they have this problem, is that they educate themselves. And the thing that I always tell people is we have to advocate for ourselves, because getting and staying clean or sober is really hard, and we need a lot of support. And people, because of shame or stigma, are usually not willing to ask for that support, and that makes the chances of success really challenging.
Do you feel like you've had a good support group?
Oh, absolutely. I've been incredibly blessed. I mean, obviously having you has been maybe the most essential thing, next to my involvement with my 12-step program. And I have a great sponsor now who's just been instrumental in so many ways to my remaining sober. And I've sought professional help for myself, and then obviously I attend meetings and I lead meetings and I work with other alcoholics. So that's all part of my plan that I have to use to stay sober, because like I said, I'm a sick alcoholic. You give me a couple holes in my game, it can be dangerous. So I need all the help I can get.
So here it is. It's very interesting. What Andy just said is, I'm a sick alcoholic, and I understand that. And by being a sick alcoholic, it's a mental disease. With cancer, you can take the X-ray, you can see the cancer. With a mental disease, it's harder to see, right? So it makes it difficult for the family and for the person going through it to understand and accept that I'm a sick individual and I'm seeking help, I'm getting help, and you have come such a long way.
Yeah, well, I want to say about, when I say sick alcoholic, that's me kind of using some self-deprecating language. But, I almost died. I almost lost, my life. My liver failed. And, a sane person would say, I'm never touching a drop of alcohol again. That's, that almost took my life. An alcoholic goes, well, maybe
I can do it soon.
There's moments like, this insane thought was like,
right.
Man, I'd sure like to have a drink again.
Right.
And that's part of the disease, is that so that's why we need all the help we can.
I always say this, and I know it's different than an alcoholic brain versus mine. I tell people, try to stop drinking yourself. A lot of you like to have that glass of wine. Just try to completely stop for a few weeks or a few days or a few months. It is very difficult for just the average person. So congratulations on 4.5 years, 54 months coming up January 5th. I mean, how does that feel? Do you feel like that's an accomplishment? I mean, because I know what you thought in your thought process at 1 year and 2 years and 3 years and 4 years now. How does it feel?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I mean, it's an accomplishment. I'm coming up on 5 years alcohol-free. I've been around the program for about 5 years, a little over 5 years. Had a little blip in my sobriety there in terms of consuming some alcohol. So my clock started over, but I'm looking at that 5-year mark right now. I'm not concerned about where I am today, but I am kind of, for whatever reason, excited about that 5-year mark. Like, yeah.
So we should have a big celebration July 5th and go to Hawaii.
No, that'd be nice. No, I don't want to celebrate, anything like that, just because I don't want to make these things a big deal, because it is, very
still
much
one day at a time.
So yeah.
That's right. Well, we could continue. There's another 20 topics, so we'll have you back on.
Surely.
The forecast. I forecast great things for you.
Oh, well,
right?
Thank you.
This is the Forecast podcast.
Yeah, it's very right. It's
so,
an appropriate name.
So what do you think about the Denver Broncos and the Chiefs this weekend?
Is that even going to be a game? I mean, Denver's really struggling, and I heard Russell Wilson's getting a lot of flack. So
yeah.
Is he hurt?
No, he's going to play.
Okay, well, yeah,
So,
I'm not super encouraged about it.
Yeah, well, Denver, it's in Kansas City. It's New Year's Day, and the Chiefs, remember, anybody can beat anybody on any given Sunday.
Yeah, no,
or Monday.
I'm surprised some of these teams that just have poor records are still willing to go out there and play hard.
Yeah, is this going to be a game, and then Houston ends up winning?
Right. So, I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. Nothing.
So we'll see. But hopefully the Chiefs take care of business, and then Cincinnati on Monday Night Football goes up against Buffalo. You have 3 big quarterbacks that the Chiefs have to deal with. Justin Herbert of the Chargers, Los Angeles Chargers, Joe Burrow of Cincinnati, Josh Allen of Buffalo. 3 J's, okay? And the Chiefs are probably going to be playing one of them, hopefully at Arrowhead, because if Cincinnati beats Buffalo, then the Chiefs, if they win their first playoff game, would be at home for the 5th straight year, which is unprecedented.
Yeah, I mean, I don't put a whole lot of stock in that. I mean, I just think that no matter where they are, they're going to have to play good, because I think that
those teams are good.
All challenging opponents.
Comes down to breaks and coaching and Patrick Mahomes being Magic Mahomes. So, but anyway, I'm expecting Cincinnati to come through with a big victory against Buffalo. So thank you. Look at that, you're doing a little sports today.
Yeah, I watch a little.
We could go into that story later, but thank you to Andy Caraway for joining us today on the forecast with Gary Lezak. Remember, you can sponsor this podcast. Contact Sandy at 810WHB.com. Like us on the podcast and make sure you subscribe on the YouTube channel. And we'll keep you updated as we go through the next few weeks. Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. And we'll have more in 2023. This is the forecast. And remember, it's sponsored by Results Personal Fitness, 135th and Metcalf, right next to the hen house. Go by and talk to David, Don, and the gang, and they'll get you in, and they do a great job. I'm meteorologist Gary Lezak with the forecast. Have a great day.